All right, so back to our staff table. I went ahead and filled out some additional data for our two employees. But what I wanted to bring up, starting with going back to the phone number, how we talked about you really want the structure to be the same in a field throughout your table. And as you see here, we've got interesting formats that are different for these different phone numbers. Now, another way we can kind of really put the control on here is uh, we know that these dashes and these parens aren't necessary for the phone number. As long as we have the number itself, that's the most important piece of information, not how it's laid out in the table. A lot of times you don't want to use your table to lay out your data in formats. You just want your table to store the data. And then if you want it to look a certain way, where you want that to happen is on a report or something like that to make it look pretty, or with the parens or whatever. So let's go ahead and let's just take out all the unnecessary stuff in these phone numbers. So I've gone ahead and done that. Now all we have is the essential digits that you would dial on a phone to get these folks. Now, another thing we know about this is only 10 characters in length. So what you probably want to do is make your table size just be the minimum amount needed to just store this data. And then when it comes time to create reports and such, then we can put the parens and such around it using what we call like formatting or masking the data. So I'm going to go ahead and go back into the design view, and we'll change this to be 10. Now there's another piece down here I want to kind of highlight. Another option for this field is what they call a mask, and therefore it'll sort of simulate when you enter data, what it would look like, but it's just for looks only. It's not actually how the data will be stored in the table. So let's say you want, when you're entering the data, you want it to, instead of just looking at as 10 numbers all squished together, maybe you like seeing the dashes and such. It kind of helps you visualize as you're entering a phone number. You can do that in this line right here, the input mask. So let's say that for input, every time we input it, we want it to kind of look like a number, dash, number, dash, number, kind of like how a phone number would sort of look when you're entering it. So let's go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what this kind of looks like here in a second. But one other field, I want to come back to this modified date field. This is going to store the information behind the last time the record was updated. Now what we know, when the first time you create a record, that'll also be, I guess, the date you modified it because you actually created it. Now, when you create that, what you could do is just type in today's date as the modified date. But there's another way you can go about this and let the table do it itself. And that's under here, the default value. So what will show up in the default values when you create a brand new record, whatever value you put in here is what by default will be in that table. You can change it if you want as you're creating a record, but in some instances, maybe the default value is just fine, and it'll save you the step of having to enter it yourself. So for a default value for a modified date, you would probably just want it to be whatever today's date is. Now the syntax for doing that is just saying date and then the two parens together. What this will do is that when you create a new record, it's just going to go and put today's date in that field by default. You can change it if you want, but for a modified date, you're actually going to want it to be today's date. That's the accurate value there. So let's go ahead and save that, and I'll show you what that will do. We've got all our employees in here. Now, for the modified date, look down here. See how it's got it kind of primed up and ready to go for the next record we enter. Now for these guys here, because we've already entered them, the default date won't show, but we can go ahead and just type it in. Let's just put 7/18 in for those guys as well. Now, if we're going to enter a third employee, see how the default date is already in there for you, and you're good to go there. The other thing I want to point out now, remember how we put that input mask and phone number? See how it now has those dashes in there? Remember what I said though, that's just for looks, but at least when you're looking at this table, it looks like a phone number. It doesn't look like numbers all squished together, but behind the scenes in the table itself, it's just those 10 digits. Those dashes are just your input mask. So it's there for looks. Let's go ahead and let's say we hired a new employee, and let's see how this all comes together. Our new employee is going to be Janet Jones, and we'll have her born on Halloween. And let's say we just hired her today. Now phone number, watch what happens when I start typing this in. Let's say her area code is 412. See how the input mask is kind of holding the space for me. It's kind of making it look like a phone number. We're not storing it in the table that way behind the scenes, but here in the front, and as we're typing in here, it kind of looks like I'm typing in a phone number. So that's sometimes easier on the eye, easier to look at. So let's just go ahead and fill this out. And, we'd fill in our address, city, state, zip, and what have you. But see how the modified date is already in there by default. I don't have to enter the date of this record. So that's some of the other options available to you when you're adjusting your fields, and how you can put controls on your data, or how you can put in default values so you don't have to enter them yourselves. You have all kinds of options when you're going and into the design view of your fields and making all kinds of changes. As you saw, the list was really long. I don't want to cover all of them. You can certainly research more of those on your own, but I just want to make you aware that those exist and you have those options available to you. So that's it for this video. Thanks for joining, and we will have plenty more to come as we move along. Thanks.